Hey everybody, welcome back to Organizational Behavior. We are now in the second video of week 2. So week 1, we did an introduction to the class. We talked about what is OB, did a review of management, talked a little about the orientations to work, why do people go to work, some challenges and opportunities facing managers. And then in the second week, we started talking about group behavior. And so with group behavior, we started in our first video by talking about what is a group, what does that mean? A group is different than an organization, it's different than a team, but it is a group. And so, and that is, it involves 2 or more individuals, so multiple people. Obviously, you can't be in a group alone. There needs to be a goal, some sort of purpose or reason, and then it needs to be interdependent, so that the people in the group need to work together. There needs to be some sort of involvement. If we are all doing our own thing, then we're not a group, right? We're certainly not a team, but we haven't even gotten to work teams yet. I think that'll be next week. So for now, let's keep talking about groups. Now, we talked last time about what is a group, then how is a group formed, the 5-step model and the punctuated equilibrium model. We also talked about the different types of groups, such as command, task, friendship, and so on, social. And then we also talked about social identity theory. We talked about basking in reflected glory. We talked about social identity threat, all of the things that people get from being in groups and how most people self-identify as the groups they're in rather than the person they are. Most people will not tell you their personality or their values. Most people will just tell you what groups they're in. So it's very important to understand that. And then we started talking about the factors that influence groups, and we talked about the first factor, which was roles. The idea that we have different expectations of what role someone should play. If someone is a teacher, a manager, a doctor, a lawyer, a prison guard, we have these ideas, these expectations, and that is what's called role expectation. Having an expectation about how someone should behave because they are 65 years old, or they are from Norway, or they are from, a difficult area of their city where there's a lot of violence, or, they're whatever it is, or their father is a politician, or, whatever it is, we have these expectations of people based on their social identities. And that gave rise to something we called the psychological contract, which was the idea that in order to dispel or get rid of or cancel some of these role expectations that people have, it's important that we sit down at the beginning with our employees, if we're managers, and we lay out this sort of psychological contract that says, here's what I expect from you, based on your role coming into my company as an American, or coming into my company as a PhD, or coming into my whatever I, the manager, expect from you. Let me put that down on the table and tell you. And then what do you, the employee, expect from me, the manager or the CEO or the HR? What do you expect? And we put that down on the table and we talk about it. And we also talked finally about how that's changed a little bit in the modern world. And now we have something that we think of as more of a modern, what's called a new moral contract. So it's not only about expectations, because as the social context of the world changes, this old sort of master and servant idea, it really is no longer applicable to a lot of employees. A lot of employees these days, as we said, the traditional psychological contract is, welcome to the Ford Car Company. You are 25 years old. You're going to work here for the next 25 years, and then you're going to retire. And that's just not true anymore. I mean, almost nobody has that kind of experience anymore. And therefore, the traditional master and servant relationship has been a little bit modified by the current social context. So now we have what's called a moral contract. And this says people abandon this stability of lifetime employment idea. That's gone. So we say, welcome to the Ford Car Company. We're going to help you learn and develop yourself so that when you leave here in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, you're ready to go on to the next opportunity. We know you're going to leave. You know you're going to leave. We don't need to pretend that you're going to be here for the rest of your life. But we do need to understand that when you leave, where are you going? I have friends who understand this, who've done very well and have been able to start at an entry-level job and then move up and move up and move up, and now they're, middle or higher level managers by around age 30 or 31. And that's where they want to be. If you want to be on that track, by the time they're in their 40s, they will probably be vice presidents or senior vice presidents. And then, that's really how you have deep stability in life. But it's an understanding of continuous learning. So that's all group property one, roles. And the problem with all of this is if we don't know this as managers, we end up with a lot of conflict. And that's where an individual has divergent role expectations. So let's say that I'm a teacher in CIP and the school expects me to really help these students when the students have problems. I've lived in China for 13 years. I speak the language. I've dealt with life in China. And when the students have problems, they should come and they should talk to me and I should help them. But I don't think that's my role. I think my role is to be a strict teacher. And you come to class, you come on time, you do the work or you fail. That's it. That's my job. So we have this conflict between what I think my role is and what they think my role is. And without a psychological contract and a discussion of expectations, we're going to end up with a lot of conflict or even inter-role conflict, where there are different groups that are in opposition. So let's say there's one group of the administration that thinks teachers should be more loving and caring and supportive. And there's another group that thinks teachers, we need to get the grades higher. We need students to write better papers. It's all about the papers. This is university. And then other people are like, no, it's not about the papers. It's about life. And you get these different groups. And this happens a lot in business during mergers, during acquisitions in multinational companies. You get a lot of conflict if expectations aren't clarified. That's our first group property. Our second group property that affects groups is norms. So what do we mean by norm? Well, this is what we think of as normal behavior. And a norm is a standard of behavior, a standard of conduct. So what are the norms, for example, for dress, for dressing, wearing clothes at CIP? I've seen people dress very differently. I've seen some people dress nicely and wear, nice pants and a belt and a shirt for a man. Have you ever seen a woman wear like a formal dress? No, but I've seen some women wear dresses. Some girls wear dresses. I don't really think I've seen too many men wear a suit, but sometimes. I've never seen someone dress in a really inappropriate way, because we have certain standards. And if someone came to class dressed in, pajamas, let's say, that's not, super inappropriate. But if somebody came to class in like pajamas, it's possible that people would complain. If I know that in my past job, when I worked at a television station, there was one girl who came in dressed like her father would never let her leave the house like this. She was dressed like she was going out to a club on a Saturday night in order to get picked up. She would just looked, it was totally inappropriate for a work environment. And people did say something to the boss, because it wasn't an acceptable standard of behavior. I've never really seen a fist fight, at CIP. I've seen people get angry. I've seen people maybe push each other, but I've never seen people, have a real fist fight. Now, at some schools, certainly schools in America, in violent areas, there are fights all the time, and that's considered acceptable. In my high school, there were very few fights. It wasn't common. It wasn't really an acceptable method of behavior. So what we have is norms. Norms are different in different places. They're different in different age groups. They're different in different socioeconomic classes. It's different for the rich people or the people who join some very cultured. If you go to the opera, how you're expected to act at the opera and how you're expected to act at a rock and roll concert is going to be different. Those are different norms. And we have to understand that groups have their own types of norms. So some of the norms that groups have, first of all, performance norms. And that says, how hard should you work? And that's interesting. What should be your level of output? How late is it okay to be late? If one of the students comes to class 10 minutes late, most people don't say anything. But if a student comes to class 25 or 30 minutes late every class, you'll see when they come in, everybody will be like, hey, he's late again. Oh my gosh. It'll start to happen. Why? Because there's a norm in the group that it's okay to be a little late, but if you start to come very late, it makes us all look bad. And the teacher's angry now, and we don't want to deal with an angry David. Angry Davids are no fun. We want happy, silly Davids. Happy Davids are fun bears, and angry Davids are not fun. So, and then how hard should you work? If you guys have a group assignment, which you will, and you see that one person in your group is working 6 hours a day on this, and nobody else is, you know what's going to happen. Those other people in the group are going to start saying, hey, why is he working so hard? Come on, just calm down a little, dude. Man. Now, why would you want someone to not work hard? Because it's a norm. There's a standard of behavior. And we have this in all jobs, right? There's a certain level that people are expected to work at. And when someone works too hard, most people don't say oh, good job, good job. No way. Most people are like, hey, man, what are you doing? You're making us all look bad. Stop coming so early. Stop saying so late. And they'll call each other names, right? This is part of the Hawthorne studies, which we'll talk about in a minute. There are appearance norms. That's dress code. And unspoken rules about when to look busy, right? That's a big norm in some jobs. And it's terrible. It's a real psychological problem when the boss comes over and everybody has to pretend to be busy. Why? That actually causes, and we'll talk about that later in the course, but there are certain kinds of stress that are caused directly from things like that. It's really unhealthy to be in an environment where you need to pretend things. And we see this with certain kinds of jobs. For example, a flight attendant on an airplane, that they are expected to smile and be polite all the time. And you say hey, where's my pillow? This pillow's dirty. It smells bad. I hate this flight. This is stupid. You're stupid. And they're expected to be okay, I'm so sorry, sir. Here's a new pillow. Please let us know if you have any other problems. Thank you so much for flying with us today. This right here can cause people to die early. It's so much stress to have this false persona. And it's something really in modern companies that is part of the psychological contract, to actually say to your boss when you start, listen, I get my work done, and I don't leave work until my work's done, and I don't miss deadlines. But I also really don't like to pretend I'm busy when I'm not. If I have free time, for example, if you come and see me in the office at CIP during lunchtime, I'm probably watching videos on YouTube and eating. Or I'm looking at clips on, YouTube, or looking at CNN, or, it's not related to work. I refuse to pretend that I'm not going to do that. Why? I get my work done. I work hard. I don't stop working if the deadline is coming up. Why do I need to pretend? And that's something that I make clear. It's not like I say that to the boss right at the beginning, but in the expectation contract at the beginning, I do say, listen, I'm the kind of person who gets my work done, but I'm also not someone who likes to pretend. Is it okay if I have nothing to do when my work is done if I leave? Do you need me to sit here and just stare at the wall, from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock? If that's what you need, tell me now. I want to know, because it really factors into whether I accept a job. Social arrangements. These are standards of behavior. And these, you see them so much in high school. Who do you eat lunch with? Who do you form friendships with? This is really important, these norms of groups. You have to watch if you're a manager. Who are people going to lunch with? And who's going to lunch alone? That's going to tell you something about the in-groups and the out-groups. And this is information you can use. Because if you take someone who's been going to lunch alone and you're able to put them in a group and make that group feel special, tell them they're special, isolate them, don't let other people in the group, that person is now going to be part of a new group when they didn't have a group before. And they're going to work so hard to stay in that group because they didn't have a group before, and everybody loves groups. Resource allocation norms, right? Who should do the hardest jobs? Who should get the most money? And there's certain acceptable standards of behavior. Sometimes in a class, I'll have a student who likes to research and always raises their hand. And, we all know somebody like that. I think I was that person. I know I was that person in college. I was always the one who was like, teacher, I know, So does that person always get the difficult work? Is that an acceptable standard of behavior? And then there are other people who never come to class and they're just kind of not interested. Well, if I give them the difficult work, you know that they're not going to get it done. So we have these norms, these acceptable standards of behavior that run all throughout groups. And they're also related to people's emotions. So what is normal, acceptable, standard behavior? Is it okay to cry in class? Is it okay if the teacher says something sad or I show you a video and it makes you upset? Is it okay to just start crying? Or is that not acceptable in our society? What if you're a man? What if you're a tough, strong man? Is it okay to start crying? Is it okay to, to blush, to be ashamed? Is it okay to be nervous? Are you allowed to have any emotions? And people who grew up in different ways in the same culture tend to have similar shared emotions. So being from America, I have sort of a range of emotions that I can go from this sad to this happy. From sad to happy, I'm allowed to do that. Where someone from China might never display that level of emotions, and probably wouldn't, in fact, because there's acceptable standards of behavior. And if I'm in a group, and here's another one, is expressing anger. If I'm in a group with all Chinese coworkers and I'm really angry at the way things are being done, and I say guys, this is so stupid. How can you all be this? I mean, come on, this is crazy. Let's not do it this way. We're wasting time and blah, blah, blah. And, I'm American. I talk like this. I get angry, but I'm not angry at you. I'm angry at the process. I'm angry at the rules. I'm angry at the system. And as an American, I'm encouraged to ask questions and to express my feelings. Now, if I said that, and I have done this, so I know from experience, in a group of Chinese coworkers, often emotion gets shut down. There's no emotion whatsoever. And the only thing they will say is 你想太多吧. You think too much. You think too much. Don't think too much. You think too much. I used to get crazy when I was working in television. And I would have all of the directors and the actors, and they would love some idea. And they were so passionate about it. And then the producer, who was like a 65-year-old man who had a lot of money, would just look at it and be like, no, I don't understand this. And I was like, dude, of course you don't understand it. You're a 65-year-old man who lived through the Cultural Revolution. These are 21-year-old people who know what everybody wants to watch. Give them a chance. And he was like, no, I don't understand it. And all the Chinese people immediately would just shut down, And I would say, aren't you upset? And they would be like, no, this is life. This is China. These are life. This is what happens. Just so robotic, because that's the acceptable standard of behavior. And that's very different in different cultures. And if you don't know that as a manager, that we need to pay attention to cultural norms and emotional norms, then you're really going to miss this. What about gossip? Can gossip have a normative function? Can it have a positive function? How is it different to gossip about someone on social media rather than face-to-face? Is there a benefit to gossip at work? Well, the benefit is what's called the grapevine. And we'll talk about this later in the semester when we talk about communication. But a lot of information, in fact, most information in offices is exchanged employee to employee. Just like for you guys, if you have a question about when is the final exam, most of you are not going to go directly to Mei Ling. Most of you will ask each other first, because the grapevine is how we get our information. And so gossip tells us things we need to know. Hey, that guy over there cheats. Hey, that girl over there, I don't know. She always does the homework early and is willing to share it with people. Whatever the gossip is that's going around. And I don't really mean social gossip, like who's dating who. I mean sort of Business gossip. Hey, did you hear that that person's going to get a promotion? Hey, did you hear that person just got into a master's program at Fudan? Hey, did you hear that person just got a job? That kind of gossip can be positive because it encourages people to know what's going on with each other. We can't just have a big scoreboard on the wall of who got a promotion and who got a job and who got an internship. But if we say, hey, did you hear that girl? She's teaching English for 300 an hour. Wow, like that has a positive function. It lets us know what's possible. Gossip isn't always bad. And I've seen a lot of teachers who don't really understand this. And mostly I do mean Chinese teachers who would tell the students like, no gossiping, no talking. You are not allowed to do that. And it's like, why? This is how people communicate with each other. You don't want that to stop. I mean, I don't want people whispering during class, but you don't want it to stop. So the norms that we have in our groups that are accepted by the group, they strongly, strongly influence how people behave. And now let's talk for a minute about the Hawthorne studies, because that is the biggest example we have of normative behavior. So this was Western Electric, what later became GE, between 1924 and 1932. There were these experiments. And first, the experiments were conducted by the actual management of the company. But what they started with was the illumination experiment, and that was so confusing to them that they brought in this Harvard professor named Elton Mayo, and he eventually became very famous for this study. So you might already know this. It's very famous. If you do, just bear with me. You do need to know it for this class. So in the illumination experiment, this was before Elton Mayo came in, and the management was experimenting with the brightness of light versus productivity. What they thought was, if you had a chart, as the light got brighter, right, as the light got brighter, they thought that productivity would increase. That was their idea. That's not pretty. They thought, well, none of this is very nice looking. They thought that if you had productivity here, this is productivity going up, and this over here is the brightness of light. They thought as we make the light brighter, productivity will go up. That was their idea. And so the management started increasing the light every day, and productivity did go up. And then when the light was very bright, they thought, okay, well, let's start making the light dimmer. And see, they expected productivity should go down, right? If it goes up when it's bright, then it should go down when it's dim. But that's not what happened. Actually, as they made the lights dim, productivity went up. Now, this made no sense at all. People work harder when the light is bright and work harder when the light is dim. In fact, they had to dim it to the point that it was as dark as moonlight before people started lowering productivity. So then they tried changing other things. They opened windows, they changed the temperature, they added music, they changed the chairs, everything. They just kept changing things. And what they found is productivity just kept increasing. And this made no sense. So they brought in this professor, Elton Mayo, to try to understand this. And Elton Mayo and his team found something amazing, which is totally different than the classical theory of management. The classical theory of management said that humans are rational, and that we have a rational economic concept of motivation called the prime motivator, which is money. You want people to work harder, you give them more money. It's just all about money. But what Elton Mayo found out is it wasn't about money. Making the lights brighter had nothing to do with money. Opening the window had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with consideration. When the workers believed that the managers cared about them, the workers believed that the managers were raising the lights or lowering the lights or opening the windows or turning on music because they wanted the workers to be happier. And when people believe that the managers care about them, people work harder. This actually was a turning point in management science, which you've learned in management, because this led up to the human relations school of management, which showed that people are not just tools and parts of machines. People actually have feelings. So then they did some other experiments, right? So this was conditions were being made worse. They were making it too cold. They were making it too dark, and production kept increasing. And that had really to do with consideration. Then they tried the relay assembly test room. And this was one of our first experiments with norms. So they had this whole room full of women who were working. And this was Western Electric. They were making some sort of, electrical part. So let's say they're wrapping wire around a magnet or something. And what they did is they took 6 of the women from this big room, let's say where there were 35 or 40 workers. They took 6 women and they put them in a special room. And they said, you guys are special. You're our special team. They gave them a little extra time for lunch, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just a couple of extra. They didn't give them more money, but they gave them some extra benefits. And here's what's really important. They said to everybody else, the other 30 people or 40 people in the room, you guys, you can't be part of this special team. These 6 women are the special team, and you guys, I'm sorry, you can't be part of that team. Well, what happened? The 6 women started working harder. Why? Because they were special, right? They're special now. This taught us a lot about group behavior. The idea that when you make people into a group, it doesn't take very much, and they will bond together and start working harder because they're special. The interviewing program. This was the same idea of wondering about what happens if we show our employees consideration. So before the interviewing program, what had typically been the case was at Western Electric, when they wanted to interview their employees, tell me how this machine is working. Okay, you use this machine every day. Is there anything that could be better? They write it down. Okay, how long does it take you to do this thing? Okay, they write it down. What could be improved about that? Okay, they write it down. Good, thank you for your help. Next, please. Next person comes in. Okay, you use this machine. How can that be better? Good. What they found is that was too direct, only asking questions about work. And they said, in line with this idea of consideration or caring, let's meet up with the employees and let's ask non-direct questions, open-ended questions, non-judgmental questions, such as, how are you? How's your job? How's your family? Do you think your job has a good or a bad effect on your home life? Do you think you work too much? What's your favorite thing about working here? What's your least favorite thing about working here? And what they found is when they asked those questions that showed they cared, they got so much more information about the actual job that the workers were doing, about the machines, about how long things took, than if they had asked those questions specifically. Because if the workers felt like the managers cared about them, they would give honest feedback. Finally, the bank wiring observation room experiment. This is where there were 14 men working in a room, and they were also, building components. And they said to the men, we're going to try a new system of financial incentives. Instead of paying you all per day, we're going to pay you unit price. If you make 1 of these, you get $1. You make 10 of these, you get $10. You make 20 of these, you get $20. We don't care. However many you make, that's how much you get. Now, their expectation, I say they, Elton Mayo's team, okay, the Harvard sociologists, their expectation was, according to classical theory of management, money is the prime motivator. If somebody can make 20 a day, they will. If somebody else could make 30 a day, they will. They'll work to maximize their financial rewards. But that's not what happened. In fact, out of this room full of men, most of them, let's say, and I don't have the exact numbers, let's say most of them made 10 units a day. And 2 people were able to make 20 a day. Did those 2 people make 20 a day? Well, the answer was on the first day or second day they did. But what happened when everybody made 10 units except these 2 guys who made 20? Were they welcome at lunch? Nope. They would sit down at lunch and everybody would say, oh, what's up, jerk? People would actually hit them in the arm and say, hey, man, ha, 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 stop working so hard. Nobody wanted to be their friends. Ow, David. Nobody wanted to be their friends anymore. And so these 2 guys, stopped working so hard. The group created these performance-based norms about what is an acceptable amount of work. And this is scary when you realize, could the workers produce more? Yeah, they could. but they won't, because the group will look for a natural equilibrium. And if most of the people produce this much, even if you could produce this much, you're not going to do it probably because you don't want to be an enemy of the group. You're going to lower your level to the group. So just because your workers aren't producing is, you wonder like, hey, I know this person. When they were at this other company, they were producing so much. They were doing so much. Now they come to my company and they're slowing down. What's going on? It's the group. It's not them. The group is slower, and so they're matching the group. So, just to look through you can read these slides again. We don't need to go through it again. We already talked about the illumination experiments, the relay assembly test room, bank wiring observation, and, the norms of the group had a number of don'ts, right? Don't do too much. Don't do too little. Don't tell on your coworkers, right? These are the rules of the group. And that's what the scientists began to realize. And that the group enforced these norms through sarcasm, name calling, punches to the arm, things like that. And if you weren't part of the group, you were ostracized. You were excommunicated from the group, and nobody wants that really. So these conclusions are very important from the Hawthorne studies because these really show us a lot of things about groups. One, that behavior is related to feelings, very closely related. That if you want employees to behave differently, just offering them more money, it's not always the right solution. Two, how the group acts can influence how the individual acts. Three, how effective the group is can influence the individual's output. So how much work the group does, right? If you have a group that is highly effective, then when people come in, the norms of the group are to be highly effective. If you go to a job and you find out that, I'll give you an example at that same TV station I worked at. I was coming to work every day, get there at 9 o'clock, leave at 5 o'clock. And I actually had some of the other workers come up to me and said, man, what are you doing? All of us come here at 11 because our bosses don't care. The bosses show up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock. They don't care. So we show up at 11. Stop coming so early. Stop working so hard. Of course, the group standard is going to influence the individual output. And then finally, money is not a big factor when you're talking about group standards. What is a big factor is security. I want to be part of the group. I'm safe if I'm part of the group. Having more money doesn't give me that security. So we talked about this idea of status groups, which we also call reference groups. What groups would you define yourself as a part of? Are you part of the, I'm the African in China group. I'm in the Thai group or the Laos group, or I'm in the Americans group, or I'm in the SIPSA group, or I'm in the tennis playing, the marathon running, the weightlifting, the tough person. I fight easily. I get angry. I'm in the angry people. I'm in the going to mint group, whatever these groups are. That's one question. But then another question is, what group would you like to define yourself as a part of? Do you want to be part of the rich kids group? Is that a thing? Do you want to be part of the cool kids? What does that mean? Because everybody has groups that they refer to as, here's who I am. I'm a person who is this group, this group, this group. That's how I explain myself. But then there's all these other groups that I want to be part of. And that's pretty important too, because that's going to lead to a lot of conformity. And we need to understand this too, because this gives us, you just read an article last week about groupthink. And this has a lot to do with conformity. So groups put a lot of pressure on people. Let's say I want to be part of the cool people who go out every weekend to the new clubs. Okay, there's a group of people who always go to the newest clubs, and I want to be in that group. Or I want to be part of the group that always listens to the best music. They always know where the coolest concerts and what hip hop is going on, and I want to be in that group. Or I want to be in the group that always wears the coolest fashions and is always on top of fashions. I want to be in these groups. There might be a lot of pressure on me to change my attitudes or to change my behaviors. What if the cool kids say, yeah, David, we'll invite you to these clubs with us, but, none of us go to school on Mondays. We party all the time. We just don't go to school on Mondays. Am I going to go to school on Mondays? That pressure from the group might override my belief that I should be a good student. So when people conform to these groups, people define themselves, or would like to define themselves, as a member, and the members of the group start to feel significant. Group members can actually have more influence on you than your whole family in a lot of ways. And we need to be careful about this, but we also need to recognize that it can be used in a positive way. So for example, if you have a gender diverse group, like I will do my best to never have a group of 4 guys from the same country. That's not a diverse group, and the problem with that is these people will all think in the same way that they are raised to think. You get 4 Americans, they're going to think like Americans. Now, in fact, there was an interesting study done where this was done more for law, but it was a sociology study where in law we have these juries, right? 12 people. It doesn't have to be 12. It could be 5 or 7 or whatever. Often it's 12. And 12 people will make a decision. And what they found is in America, they tested if they had 12 white men, they would often make certain decisions. And if they had, let's say 11 white men and I'm number 12, and I come in and I say, hey, everybody, it's really hard living in the city where it's very hard to get a job and there isn't good health care and the salary is low. And I think that that's why this person committed a crime and that you should not find them guilty. Now, if I'm white and I'm a man and all the other jurors are white men, the studies showed that most people didn't believe me. But if a well-educated black man came in and made that same argument, the other white men often were like, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Because what happened is the group changed, right? And it became more of a diverse group. Now, it wasn't gender diverse, but a group that has diversity tends to have more creativity. PC norms increase. What's PC? Politically correct, right? How do people talk? How do people behave? When you have different genders, you have equality, you have people from different countries, different age groups. It could even be you have like a low-level worker and a high-level worker. When you put people in different groups like that, you get a lot more creativity, right? The probability of positive impact grows if people align their thinking with these positive norms. So it's important that we try to make our groups diverse because it actually helps us to be creative thinkers. And if we don't, and the groups all are focused on, we all think the exact same way, my group is 5 Republicans and we're all from the same small town. Well, that kind of thing can actually lead to very deviant behavior. Deviant means negative. And this is where, let's say, I go to work and all of my coworkers are angry. They say, this is not fair. Right now, actually, my job would be fine. But let's say there are some jobs in New York where people are losing their jobs, people are facing unemployment, and people are saying, this is terrible. Let's all throw garbage out the windows. And I think, I don't want to throw garbage out the windows. But all my coworkers are like, David, come on, throw garbage out the windows. Let's express our anger. Well, that kind of thing can become a norm. If I don't do that, they're going to say, David, don't you stand with us? Are you not part of our group? Are you not our friend? And when that kind of thing happens, you get this deviant workplace behavior. Also, being outside of the social groups, of the norms, leads to very antisocial behavior, also called workplace incivility. And that's where, and I've seen this happen even at CIP, when people, for whatever reason, are outside of the groups, and then somebody will say to them like, hey, did you do that work? And you'll see a student say like, I always do my work. Maybe you don't do your work, but I always do my work. And it's like, that's incivility. There's no reason to talk like that. But that increase in rudeness, disregard towards others, that's when you start to see like somebody falls down or somebody drops all their books and you just walk by and don't help them. That kind of thing starts to happen when they're in groups and people are not in the groups and they can't get into the groups. They start to feel deviant and have incivility. So we really need to understand this. Now, there's lots of kinds of deviant workplace behavior. There could be property behavior, which is, lying about how long you worked, stealing, sabotage, making sure people don't succeed. It could be production-based deviant behavior, leaving early, working slowly, wasting. It could be political, which is showing favoritism, gossiping, blaming people. It could be personal, which could be harassment. It could be verbal abuse. There's lots of examples of deviant behavior. And as sort of a manager 2.0, we need to understand that this is part of our job. Your job is not to just tell people what to do, and then one person is always rude, and you can't just fire someone for that. That's what a terrible manager does. Terrible managers just fire people when they're rude. I mean, not always. Sometimes you do need to get rid of somebody. They just don't fit. But to just fire somebody without trying to fix the problem, that's not very good management. Why aren't they following the group norms? Why aren't they part of the group? Now, what about cultures? Do cultures have different norms? Like the Chinese culture, the American culture, the German culture? What about collectivist cultures? What's a collectivist culture? So we haven't talked yet about Hofstede. Gert Hofstede is his name, who was an IBM programmer, worked for the company IBM in the 1970s, and ended up becoming a sociologist and created these 6 theories of how we talk about different cultures. His cultural ideas. But a collectivist culture is a culture where people believe the group is more important than the individual. So America is an individualistic culture, right? This is my life. I live once. I'm in charge of my own happiness, and I'm going to do what makes me happy. If I make money, that's my money to spend. That's a very individual attitude. Yeah, I've got it. I want to take care of my mom and my sister. I'm not a bad person. I want to take care of my family. But ultimately, if I want to take a job that, is across the world, I will. Where a collectivist culture is much more like my responsibility is to the group. The group comes before my own desires. So I want to, be a musician. But in my group of friends, they say that's not okay. You should study. So I study. Because it's not really about me. It's about the group. It's about what the Chinese would lovingly call harmony. What Confucius would call zhongyong. But the idea, in that would be translated as the doctrine of the mean, which is something we don't really have in English. It's a Chinese translation, or the golden mean, which says, don't try to be different from the group. Pretty much what it says. And things that are good enough are good enough. Just let there be harmony. Now, is this bad? Well, I mean, America has been around for 200 years, and we're already a snake eating its own tail. China's been around for 5,000 years. So I don't know. In fact, most cultures that are ancient cultures are collectivist, because the only way to exist for thousands of years is to put the group before the individual. And who knows, maybe America will continue and thrive as a country, or maybe in 50 years and 100 years and 500 years, it'll dissolve and become something else, because collectivism is the only thing that works, putting the group before the individual. I don't know. But do they have different norms in China than a culture that's very individualistic like America? And that's an interesting question. And yeah, I mean, obviously, the standards of behavior, what's okay, is very different. Let's say, and you might see this, it happened a lot in the past, not as much now, but there'll be big companies or banks, big companies in China that will have advertising slogans, billboards, and you'll look at them and you'll think the English is wrong. Like very obviously wrong, like something is misspelled. And you think, God, if this was my company, this multi-million-dollar company, I would never accept that. But the Chinese do. And the idea is just let it go. Right? Why do you don't want to fight for every battle? Just let it go. It's not a big deal. We all understand what the advertisement's for. Now, that is a norm that does not exist in America. In America, it's like, you did it wrong, you fix it right now, or I will sue you. where in fact Confucius flat out said suing people is unethical. Using the law to fix a problem is unethical. It's wrong. It's morally wrong to use the law to fix a problem. So in China, there's a social norm that you don't use the law. And that's changing now, but that traditionally was. What about low status versus high status groups? Do they have different norms? Well, what do we mean by status? Right? Status can certainly be whether someone is rich. Rich is high status, right? If I'm wearing an Armani suit and a Rolex watch and I don't know what expensive sunglasses are, but Ray-Bans, and I'm driving a Porsche, right? I automatically have high status. Now, are there certain social norms? Yeah, there are. Right? If you see someone like throw some garbage out of the window of a really cheap garbagey car versus you see somebody throw some garbage out of their limousine, do you think differently about that? Do you have some expectation that somebody who's driving in a $200,000 Aston Martin car, is that a kind of car? I think it is. Like some super expensive, a Maybach, a $500,000 Maybach, and they're throwing McDonald's wrappers outside the window. Do you feel differently about that than if somebody is throwing a McDonald's wrapper off of their cheap 500 RMB scooter? Maybe, because the norms are different. What about how celebrities behave? Do we expect celebrities to have a different manner of behavior than we do for regular people? Yeah, we absolutely do. So what is high status and low status? And this gets into an interesting idea called the culture of honor. Which has more honor? High status, rich, or low status? And that's an interesting question because in our society, we often don't consider the relationship between status and honor. So there was an article that studied the difference between farmers who raise crops and herders who raise sheep and asked which one has more honor, raising animals or raising plants and vegetables, which has more honor. And this was studied at DePaul University. There was something called low status compensation theory. Now, initially, these studies began with the question of why in places where there's more herding, where more people are raising animals, the murder rates are higher. So the murder rates among herders are higher than they are among farmers. And this psychologist was asking why. And what they found was very interesting. They found that the possessions of the herdsmen, so their livestock, their animals, can be stolen. It's much easier to steal a sheep than it is to steal my field of corn, right? I have 20 acres of corn. Even if you could steal one stalk of corn or one ear of corn, you can't steal 20 acres of corn, but you definitely can steal 100 sheep easily. And so this led to more psychological defensiveness. Now, think about rich people. If I'm wearing an Armani suit, which cost $4,000, and a Rolex, which cost $3,000, and Ray-Bans, which cost $500, and I'm writing with a Mont Blanc pen that cost $1,000, everything, I'm wearing diamond earring, or I'm wearing gold rings, everything is susceptible to theft. Everything can be stolen from me. You walk down the street and you're wearing a big diamond right here that's worth thousands of dollars. Are you a little more defensive when you get into, the subway? Now, maybe in China you're not. In New York, I sure am. I mean, I don't walk around with anything rich stuff. I don't have any rich stuff. But even if I'm wearing nice headphones, for me, these are a luxury item. And I have these nice headphones. There's a little bit of defensiveness. Now, if I'm wearing these really cheap, old, garbagey headphones that, I got for $5, I don't care, right? There's no need to consider that I will be taken advantage of. What about celebrities? Are they more defensive about being taken advantage of? If I have nothing, I have no status, I'm not famous, well, nobody's really taking advantage of me. Why? I have nothing. But celebrities can be taken advantage of. Rich people can lose their stuff to theft. And these ideas of status, This psychologist asked his students to write about a time when they felt important and valuable. And then another group did not write this. And then both groups, so they asked, and we're going to see this later in the semester when we talk more about sociology experiments, but one way to do a sociology or psychology experiment is to take two groups of people and ask one group to write an essay about something. Why? Because it gets your head thinking about it. And then the other group, they don't write that. And then you get them, everybody together, and you ask them a bunch of questions. And the people who wrote the essay, they were already thinking about this subject. So it's kind of in them. So they asked these students, write about a time when you felt very important. Another group didn't do that. And then they asked everybody questions about what would make you fight. If somebody said, like, somebody insulted your mother, would you fight? If somebody, slapped you on the face, would you fight? If you were at a bar and somebody bumped into you, would you fight? Like these questions about aggressive behavior. And what they found is people who were from poor backgrounds, low socioeconomic, poor backgrounds, were more willing to fight, but when these people felt good about themselves, the tendency to fight went down. I mean, how interesting is that? That people who were from poor areas where they had less, they expressed more of a willingness to respond to insults. And this makes some sense. If I'm wearing gold rings on every finger and diamonds and super expensive clothes and you insult me, it's like, hey man, look at my car. I don't care what you think of me. If you say like, David, you're short, I'd be like, dude, I have a Ferrari. I don't care what you think. But what if I have nothing? What if I don't have any of those things? I don't have the car or the money or the rings or the diamonds or the gold. And you say, David, you're short. And I'm like, what? I'll fight you. Like I have nothing. I have less. I'm more willing to fight. Because possessions make people feel good about themselves. They raise your status. And when people have higher status, they're less willing to be violent because there's more to lose. But when people feel good about themselves and they feel very positive about who they are, then if you insult them, they're like, yeah, okay, you're right, I'm short, so what? I love myself, doesn't matter. We need to understand, how do we get high status? Now, in this world, unfortunately, most people believe they want to get it the easy way. And the easy way is to buy it. But whether you buy a car or you buy a house or you wear expensive clothes or you have a beautiful husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend, you have celebrity friends, you hang out with people who are cool. This is a way to have external high status. It's outside you. Relational value, I talked about before. But the real status is intrinsic. It's having internal high status. How do you have internal high status? Well, be generous. When people are generous, typically their internal status, their feelings about themselves go up. Being helpful to people raises internal status. So it's ironic that people who have low status, like people who are from poor backgrounds, don't really have very much, and they get very angry at insults and threats. What they should be doing, theoretically, to get a higher status is not being violent. Because being violent is automatically low status behavior. Now, let's say you insult me. You say, David, you're short. And I'm like, what'd you say to me? And I come over and I punch you in the face and knock you out. Now, for a very short period of time, I feel high status. Because I have adrenaline, this chemical in my body that says like, I can't be touched, I'm the winner. And that for a very short period of time makes me feel high status. But in fact, it's very low status behavior because it distances me from the group. People won't trust me. People will see me as violent. This is not true in every group. There are some groups that are bonded together by violence, right? Whether it's a gang or a criminal enterprise or a drug cartel, there are groups that are bonded together by their level of violence. But typically, violence is low status behavior in the larger world. Right, so I might be, let's say I'm in a gang, and this gang, we define ourselves through how violent we can be. And I'm the most violent. I walk outside with a knife and I see people, I just cut them. And everybody in my gang is like, oh man, David David is amazing. He doesn't care about anything. And it's like, yeah, I'm the man. I'm David. What does the world think about me, though? Could I go to a job interview and they say, like, tell me about yourself? And I'm like, I'm the most violent. It doesn't work that way. And that's the problem, is we lose ourselves in our little group and the norms. And we can think having high status in our group gives us high status. But then you realize, oh my God, in the world, I have very, very low status, because the world doesn't value aggression, physical aggression. So how do we increase our status? I mean, what, do we just be generous and give everything away? Well, I don't say you should give everything away, but the amplifier for this is our social connections. So we do gain status by being generous, but our status goes up if people, and this is not great, but it's true, if people know we're generous, because that amplifies our generosity. Now, I'm not saying you should be a little bit generous and then go put it on Facebook and Reddit and Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and all that. But if I go out right now and I take, a bunch of food or money or whatever and I give it to people, I might feel good for a short time. If other people know that I'm part of this, part of a charitable organization, then together our status gets amplified. Now, I'm talking about world status, not small group status. So what we really need to just understand from what we talked about is norms. So the first group property is roles. The second group property is norms. The third group property is itself status. Status is extremely important in groups. This is your socially defined position or rank. Okay, so group members have this rank in the group, and there is status in every group. And this gives us something called the status characteristics theory, that says we get status from one of three places. Where do you get your status from in the group? Well, it could be power. Power over others. So if I can tell you guys what to do, because I'm the teacher, well, I have some status. Or if Jackie can tell the group what to do, because Jackie, he's the guy who knows all the best places to eat in Shanghai. And if you're not friends with him, you'll never be going to the best restaurants. Whatever it is, if you have some power and then, Jackie's in a group and someone says, hey, let's get pizza tonight. And Jackie's like, no, tonight we're eating Ethiopian food. And, you're like, okay, you're the man, Jackie. That is status, the power that you have over others. Second is your ability to contribute. So let's say you guys are doing a group project. And I think the group I was talking about last time was like, Jordan and Zayed, or I forget the group, in fact. Let's find my group again for Obi. Here we are. Okay, Romaine, Tony, Jordan, Cecile, you guys are a group. Now let's say that Cecile really understands how to write references. Her references are just on point. They're always great. And you need good references on your coursework. And the other people in the group are like struggling with it. This gives Cecile a lot of power. Right? Oh, sorry, Celine. This gives Celine a lot of power. And if she says, hey guys, we need to meet at 6 o'clock, and they're like, it doesn't really work for me. Celine can say, like, listen, guys, I'm responsible for a big part of this paper, and I'm willing to do it, but I need you to meet me at 6. And they might be like, okay, that's power, that's status. And third, your personal characteristics. Are you tall? Are you handsome? Are you beautiful? Do you dress well? Do you speak beautifully? Can you sing? Can you put makeup on very well? Are you strong with a good body? These are your personal characteristics. You do comb your hair very well. Whatever it is, it tends to be some sort of characteristic. It could be something physical. It could be the way you sing, the way you talk. It could be your logic. That some people are just so good at debating and so good at logic and rational thought. That's fine too. It could be that. Whatever your characteristic is, that can give you status, right? So why do a lot of celebrities have nothing but personal characteristic status? So status is definitely related to norms, because high status people have a lot more freedom to deviate from the norms, right? If the norm in our culture is that it's really not appropriate to wear a hat inside. I mean, that's changed a little bit, but throughout my life, it's considered rude to wear a hat inside. But let's say today we have a guest visiting our class, and it is Jack Ma, and Jack Ma has, billions and billions of dollars. He's one of the richest men in China, and he comes in wearing a hat. Is anybody going to say to him, hey, Jack, it's rude to wear a hat inside? No way. This guy's too high status, right? Political figures, celebrities can do whatever they want. The way a celebrity dresses sometimes, if they look at how Lady Gaga dresses, do you think it's okay for people to dress like that? Could you go to class dressed like that? Or go to anything dressed like that? If you went to a restaurant dressed like that, they would not serve you dinner. But Lady Gaga can, because she has high status, and that's the only reason. Because high status people don't really have to follow the rules. High status people tend to be much more assertive. They tend to be the take control people. The people who say, listen, here's what we're going to do, because they have high status. Now, when there's perceived inequity among status, and that means I think that someone else has higher status than me and they don't deserve it. Listen, if I'm sitting down with Lady Gaga and I'm like, wow, your music is so great, I'm giving her her status. But let's say I sit down with some star who I know doesn't write their own music. If you hear them sing, they're terrible. It's all production quality. Their dad was famous, and so they got famous, but they have no real talent. And I sit down and they're at this group. What am I going to feel? I'm going to feel status inequity. I'm going to feel disequilibrium. Equilibrium is it's stable. Disequilibrium is no. I'm angry now. Why does this person have all this status? Why do you have all your money? Oh, it's because your daddy gave you your career? That leads to resentment, and that leads to corrective behavior. So what's my behavior going to be? I might be rude. I might be mean. I might be disrespectful. Whatever it is. I might act towards this person in a way that I wouldn't act towards somebody if I respected their status. And there can even be stigmatization, which means what if my best friend is somebody who recently is low status? Let's say my best friend in school, recently their father was caught doing something criminal, and their father went to prison, and everybody's like, oh, your dad's terrible, and this is my best friend. My status might go down, because people would say, David, how could you be friends with that person? And I'd say, man, that person had nothing to do with what their father did. That's just another person, and last week you liked them, and now you don't because of what their father did. But my status can actually go down, even if this association is purely coincidental. It's a total coincidence. I had no idea that their status was low, but it is, and therefore your status can go down. Okay, we're past 1 hour now, and that brings us to our next group property. So let's take a little break now and then finish this up in the final video.